So basically, you'd know that the fruit and vegetable markets in the Durban CBD, there are many of them. The issue there is that they are now filling up landfills, and that in turn, creates a problem where there's methane emissions, and which is now harmful for the environment. Now, who would have thought that fruit and vegetable markets would be harmful to the environment? Now, to alleviate some of these emissions, the city, together with the Durban University of Technology and groundWork, as you've alluded in the intro, have come together and signed a memorandum of understanding where they're working together to turn that particular waste into compost and then supplying it to several people who need it, like urban farmers, even farmers themselves, and people with their own gardens. And even the city is benefiting from this. I do have with me a representative from groundWork to speak to us about this innovative way in which they're making sure that they're tackling parts of climate change. Thank you very much, Asiphile. Now, Asiphile, can you maybe explain the environmental impact of now diverting these 180 tons of organic waste from landfills?
Thank you, Nobuhle, and greetings to our viewers. Well, firstly, we started with doing hardcore research at the early morning market, and what we've done through granular audits, we found out that actually almost 80% of that waste is going straight to landfills. Now, the environmental impact of that, apart that you mentioned, apart from methane emissions, is that you get that during the heavy rainfalls, which Durban is actually now in prone, the drains get blocked. But most importantly, that distance that the municipal truck has to travel in terms of to the landfill, it's actually costly for them, but also there's now air emissions as well. So there are many things about that waste now is actually becoming a problem, but also in talking about the health of the people, of the well-being working in and around the markets. So seeing this uncollected waste is actually not a good sight, but also for them as well, it's not a good thing. So in terms of environmentally, we've seen that waste is becoming quite more prevalent as a climate change climate change issue, and now it's not just in South Africa, but it's worldwide. And hence, we said, how about we tackle, for instance, methane, because it's actually more potent, but actually, if we take fast action, it's easier to actually trap it and actually deal with this. And that's why we talked about, let's do composting.
So talk us through how this low-tech composting model differs from the typical waste management technologies.
Okay, firstly, we are using what we have. We don't need these high, big tech machines, which are costly, not just for the people who need to pay higher taxes, but for the city as well. But because it's inclusive, people even at home, people who have their own home gardens, institutions, even now the cities, this is something they can do. It's something that also they can replicate, but it's also, as you mentioned, low cost. For the city, they don't need to buy or even have big land that can use it. You can use plots of land. And that's why we said start off very small and then incrementally, and then make it into a big scale solution. And also even people, that's how we're changing it, because waste is not just a municipal issue, but it's also even a people and communities issue. So how can we make a solution that even everyone can partake in? And most importantly, environmentally, you've got this waste, taking it to, for instance, others who can say incinerators, it does not work. But here we are dealing with waste that we can even reuse it, in terms of that our soils are nutrient now. And it's also now addressing even the issue of food sovereignty. And people that are actually in private areas can even make their own food instead of always buying food.
I mean, you speak of people. Speak to me about how your relationship with these traders in the Durban CBD has been, if they're open to this, and if they've learned how to even separate the different waste in order to make sure that you guys get that compost that you need.
That's one of the first things. That's one of the first stakeholders that we engaged, because we wanted to show this in an inclusive manner. And the reasons why is because we know when climate change impacts, such as floods, actually when they happen, they always affect the most vulnerable sector. And in the CBD, it's the traders. So what we have done, we've done participatory action research for them to just ask about them. What is your perspective of waste, and how would you like your market to look like? And it was actually a good way, because we saw a deep dive dive on that. And then as the time went by, we saw traders standing up, and then we've trained them to say you could be the zero waste champions. We are teaching not just other traders at the market, but consumers as well, on how to separate your waste. We've done several capacity building workshops with them. We've taken to the botanical garden sites where they actually see what happens to this waste. And it's actually a beautiful thing, because now not only they are like part of the project, but we call them our zero waste champions. And we've done a lot of what we call separation and source activation. So one thing about what we've realized in Durban is that music connects us all. So we come with the music box and we actually make the music alive. And then when people start getting curious, like what's going on, we then talk about the importance of separation and source. And these activations have been done not just in the early morning markets, but also at Bangladesh market to get the traders involved. But what is important for us, we want them to actually partake in this, because in the end, this is supposed to benefit them. And slowly and incrementally, getting the idea of separation and source, but talking about separation and source in the way that is promoting clean and safe working environment. So that's how we've been getting the buy-in from them.
And then lastly, Asiphile, we spoke about earlier about how this benefits the city. Maybe speak to us about cost-wise and in terms of the coffers of the municipality, how much you are saving them. How is this particular project, helping, especially when it comes to funds?
Well, funds in terms of now, you don't need to buy, compost again, but also the compost that you have is really available. It's nutrient-rich, but you can use it again. Most importantly, that reduction of the organic waste that was meant to go to the landfill. And thirdly is that you are, I think, just a beautification. You are using your space that sometimes you find that it was abandoned and not being used again, but it's now being used in a very creative way. But also in terms of the cost saving at the landfill, in terms of the airspace, which is what we are actually aiming for, because as time goes by, if waste is not reduced, there's going to be a demand of more land to build more landfills. And as you know, that is very, very costly. So now having a waste stream that is actually diverted actually helps the city quite a lot. And it helps the lifespan of landfills to be prolonged. So they don't need to be rebuilding. Instead, now it's about how can we make compost sites available? How can we make land available that could have been used, to make a building that sometimes people are not going to use, but for that, for people to actually start composting. And most importantly, about jobs. People, it's also an employment strategy that we actually now have people that are practically working on this, because composting does need some kind of manual labor. So in that way, we are helping the city. And I think finally, even if it's not for the cost, but helping eThekwini, in after the MOU, the 3 years, is that they are meeting now their climate action goals in a way that is inclusive, in a way that is fair, most importantly, just. And what we are showing here is that with waste, you can be as creative, but most importantly, you must think about it in an environmentally just way and include the sectors that are highly, highly affected when it comes to climate change impact. And most importantly, we hope that in the end, these operations and these pilots that we are actually starting and working on, they will be embedded into eThekwini Municipality's operations. In that way, their work, even for themselves, would be sustainable. And imagine what type of presentation they'll be giving up in 2030 for the SDG goals when they're actually reviewed. So it's a small patch of work, but we are slowly, incrementally showing that it should be frugal, accessible, inclusive, but most importantly, it can be sustainable.
Thank you very much. Asiphile Khanyile from groundWork, just speaking to us about this innovative way in which they are turning tons of waste into compost. And you would have heard her there just speak to the fact that this also helps the city achieve their climate action goals. And they've also created green jobs, which is very important. You would have heard her there that compost is a skill as well as it needs labor. And therefore, this entire initiative, is helping in more ways than one. Nhlanhla.